Roll call, please.
Mr. Hawes?
Here.
Ms. Howe? Here. Mr. Kelleher?
Here.
Mr. Perry? Ms. Sedman? Here. Mr. Schnee?
Present.
Mr. Urban? Mr. Vogt?
Here.
Ms. Wakes? Present. Mr. McGinley?
Present.
Karen, I'm here.
Our first order of business will be Mr. Brzezinski. We're going to take care of that now.
Hold on.
Mr. Brzezinski is calling in this evening. This is his 4th time calling in since the beginning of the year. And per our bylaws, the council must vote on his participation in the meeting this evening. So we have a motion then to have Mr. Brzezinski participate in the meeting via the phone. He is participating due to a health issue. Calling in.
I make that motion.
Okay, Mr. Keller.
Second.
Second. Ms. Howe. On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
And Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Brzezinski is now present for the meeting. Do we have any additions, or do we have any recognitions, ceremonial proclamations? We should approve the agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Schnee, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Wakes, on the question? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Public comment on voting session agenda items. Mr. Shiner.
Good evening. The Real Estate Committee, I voiced my opposition to this, and I'll state it again. These properties have been owned by this county unknowingly, some of them for almost 100 years. To just put them up for auction, I don't think is doing proper service to the residents of this county. We have the assessor's office, we have our Buildings and Grounds Department. We could put for sale signs on these properties, let the people who own the adjacent properties know they're for sale, advertise them, and maybe get more money than we would in an auction. But I think the auction should be the last-ditch attempt. And I think these properties need to be treated very much the way the properties in the repository are. We need to actively seek people to buy them, either by giving a realtor a commission or doing it in-house with the people we already have on staff. No additional employees, just the people we have on staff between assessor's office, buildings and grounds, get some signs out there and advertise these properties for sale and see what kind of money we can actually get for the people of this county. Not auctioning them off to the select few at the lowest dollar amount to give the usual, the way it's always been done in Luzerne County. Let's start thinking about the people of this county. Let's start thinking about the fact that we are very deeply in debt and need to recoup from that as best as possible and quickly as possible. And instead of paying outrageous amounts like we do when we want to buy something, let's start getting a fair price for what we do own before we just hand it away to our friends. Thank you.
Mr. Griffith.
Good evening. Once again, the Office of Law works for the manager, doesn't work for council. The more this council takes their hands off the legislative wheel, the stronger dictatorship this county becomes. Keep that in mind. The council is supposed to be the legislative branch of government, yet we pass a resolution in item number 2 that says there's a renewal contract for Thomas and Reuter, not a mention of the dollar amount in that resolution. Even though it's in the contract, it still should be in the resolution. As we learned from ADP and we learned from the public records issue, cost overruns always happen. That should be part of the contract, should be part of the resolution. You know the dollar amount. put it in a resolution that holds the manager accountable for that dollar amount. So there is no changes unless he comes to council. It's a 3-year, multi-year contract. It needs to be stated as such in the resolution. I didn't see anything in the contract that says how many licenses they are. Maybe when you get to that item under discussion, you could let me know or the public know how many licenses that we're paying that $32,000 a year for, or is it just carte blanche, anybody could use the system, and we don't have to worry about licenses. I think it's by license, and I don't know how many employees we have in the public defender's office, but I don't know if that number correlates with that need. Item number 4 is the motion to adopt a resolution authorizing county manager to execute the sale of county-owned property by auction. Once again, a minimum bid. I think this council should put a minimum bid of 10% on any auction property. So this county's guaranteed some money for that. There's nothing to stop the manager from giving that property away for $1. And isn't it convenient that in that resolution it also says that if he can't sell it by auction, he gets to sell it any way he wants. So let's take our hands off the wheel and let the manager do whatever he wants. Put the language in the resolution to protect the taxpayers of this county for property that we own. This is not your property, and it's not the manager's property. It's the resident's property. Protect us, please. Put that information in the resolution. And lastly, in item number 5, motion to adopt resolution regarding monthly budget reports. Thank you, Ms. Hauk, for asking for that one more time. I think I've asked for that every time there's been a budget report, and Ms. Hauk has asked for it several times. The division report is where you people will see where the money is being spent. That 20,000 foot level, you see nothing. And that's why you get it that way, so you can see nothing. The manager spends what he wants, when he wants, and how he wants. This legislative body needs to step up and do their job and legislate, once again, so the people of this county are protected against a manager who works with his office of law to bamboozle this council. It's time to stop that. Put the legislation in place so we're protected, please.
Those are the 2 that I have in regard agenda items. I have 2 other gentlemen who filled out but did not indicate agenda. Mr. McCabe?
Yeah. Last month I listened to Council and Dave about the properties you had stay dormant for how many years? 50 years? What? Ed Berminski was on county commissioner. Steve Urban was a county commissioner. I can't believe they sat back and let these properties just sit there and not get any money out of them. And like Brian said, don't put them up for sheriff's sale or anything. You know, sell them. Try to get $1 out of them. But you know, just think about it. You know, there's money involved there, so why give them away? You know. And one other thing, a major corporation a month ago got a reassessment with the county. Isn't this assessment or real estate? No?
No.
Okay, well,
But
tell me when. Okay.
At the end of the voting session.
And the
you
other
can-
problem I told you on the way in.
Yeah, you can have the podium again. Mr. Ola, you want to speak about agenda item?
Yeah.
Oh, where do I begin? Good evening, folks. Whole bunch of stuff. Again, we've talked about this for at least a half dozen times. As previously brought up, you folks approved, without any scrubbing, over $1 million for an ERP system with no competitive bids and no competitive deliverables. And what they offered, which would be expected by any ERP system, is a VRW. And I don't know why. In 2013, it was promised to you folks that you would be trained on how to remotely access New World.
Is that an agenda item?
Yeah, it is.
What agenda?
I don't know the numbers. Help me read.
It's not an agenda item for this evening.
It's going to get there. But I'll bring it up later.
Yeah,
Right. Westlaw. How many different organizations are writing contracts or POs for Westlaw? Anybody know? How many are in the budget? How many are not in the budget? Why on earth are you doing all these things separately? Does anybody understand the concept of lot volume? Every time you double the volume, you get a 10 to 20% discount if you have a real contract administrator or a real buyer on damn near anything. Okay, it's just the way the world works. By salami slicing yourselves, you're losing money. What's so hard about taking everybody who wants to get a Westlaw contract and pull them all together? Think about it. There's also, oh gosh, I lost my place. If only I could read. That's one of them. Old business. Remember that? I can think of 3 or 4 right off the top of my head. One is, just like last time and the time before and the time before that, cost per square foot, number of square feet in the building, and for the records retention building, and the addition for the meeting room or whatever you want to call it. Okay? I don't understand, nor does anybody else who's looking at this understand how you can build a building and not get an estimate on what the cost per square foot, the standard industry metric. And you don't even know how many square feet the building is, you don't know how many square feet the addition is. You know, you can make all the examples you want, but that's lunacy. You've got to stop this stuff. With regard to Mr. Pedri's desire to avoid standard financial review of selling properties, you can't do it in the way that's being proposed right now. Somebody's got to look at bids coming in, and you've got to make this thing transparent. Not your definition of transparent, but the state government's definition of transparent. Right? You know, people are brighter than you think, and you can't just keep on going on thinking that everybody is not too bright and nobody will care, even though it may be true. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience? Thank you. Moving down, with reference to old business, so there will be a report the next meeting on the square foot cost for the record retention building. Under new business, down to number 1, motion to approve the minutes of June 26th. We have a motion? Segment. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Snee. On the question? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any abstentions? Any in opposition?
No.
1 in opposition, Mr. Berminski. Motion carries. Moving over to back page, number 1, the motion to adopt a resolution authorizing an application from the Multimodal Transportation Fund grant from the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Financing Agency. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Schnee, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Kelleher, on the question. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Edmund?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Unanimous. Moving down to number 2, motion to adopt a resolution authorizing county manager to execute a renewal contract with Thomson Reuters for the Westlaw legal research software. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Segment. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Wickes, on the question.
On the question,
Yes.
I would like to move to amend it to add in the 4th paragraph, the 4th whereas, after, or I guess right before the semicolon there, at a cost of, and to add the costs that are found on agenda page 7, of $31,825.64, $32,790.60, and $33,774.31 at that point in the whereases.
And I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Hawk made some motion. Mr. Haas made a second. On the question regarding the amendment, to add the cost. Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Ms. Help?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Sedgman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Brzezinski?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes. Amendment is added. Going back to the original resolution, with that amendment, do we have any other questions?
I just have one question.
Excuse me. Mr. Haas first, Mr. Hawk next.
Just wanted to ask you, obviously, this was in last year's budget. We have this paid through till December 31st with Westlaw?
I think it's the end of November.
Okay. But otherwise, we're covered, right, for this
Yes.
calendar year, and that's standard practice. Okay, thank you.
The money's in the budget. Yes, Ms.
I
Hawk?
just have a question. Could you explain about the licenses?
Yeah, there's actually 25 licenses. And to respond to Mr. Ola's point, we have, every year we have this discussion
We've attempted many, many times.
to combine them for the purpose that you were talking about, that, you know, buying 100 licenses or 200 licenses seems on its face to be cheaper than buying just 25. But my needs are different than, for example, the solicitor has maybe a need for, I'm going to call them libraries. There's different libraries. Westlaw sells municipal law. Westlaw sells taxation. Westlaw will sell you libraries that deal with real estate transactions. I have no need for that. So there's no need for me to buy that stuff. So it just, while it sounds like it really is, would be productive and cost savings, it's actually more expensive for me to buy stuff and pay for stuff that I don't use. And just as another example, I'm not sure if the solicitor has need for criminal defense libraries. So why would she end up paying for it? So every 3 years we go through the same discussion with Thomson Reuters, and it turns out it's actually more expensive to do it that way.
And there's confidentiality issues that we can't blend the district attorney's office with the public defender's office. Westlaw can't guarantee that they'll be separate, and that's a very, very significant issue. The courts have their own needs, which don't match any of our needs. So we've attempted, every year we meet, we ask Westlaw to give us numbers, and
Any other questions? Ms. Sedgman?
Stephen, was there any, and probably this has been done years ago, but was there any possibility of seeing how Nexus compares to Westlaw, or?
I get solicited by LexisNexis pretty often. My response to them and to you is kids coming out of law school, including myself 30 years ago, we all learned on Westlaw. So to change providers is really, would be problematic. It's a different product, and in my mind, it's not as good. These guys actually treat us very well. When you break down the numbers, it works out to be about $1,000 a year per license, a little, maybe $1,100 a year. That's incredibly cheap. It's about $100 a lawyer, or $110 a lawyer per month. It's really not. I mean, when I paid for it on my own more than 25 years ago, it was more than $250 a month I paid. So it's really actually pretty. They give us a nice product for a pretty decent price.
Anyone else?
Our office switched from Lexis to Westlaw. We were able to add more licenses, and our library was expanded. They give us free training. We can access lawyers who work for Westlaw to assist us if we need particularized research.
Yeah. being much older than either of you, I learned on Lexus.
Well, we first learned on the books, so I know how to use the library.
Right. Yeah, so do that.
Anyone else? Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Edmond?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving down to number 3, motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the county manager to execute a lease agreement between Luzerne, Wyoming County's Area Agency on Aging and Susquehanna Properties Management for the Dallas Active Adult Center.
So moved.
Mr. Kelleher, do we have a second?
Yes.
Ms. Segman? On the question, Ms. Roselle's here if we have questions. Anyone with questions regarding the lease arrangement? No questions? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Edmond?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Very good. Number 4, motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the county manager to execute the sale of the county-owned property by auction. Do we have a motion? Ms. Segman? Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Vogt? On the question?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
For the manager, how will the properties be advertised? In what way?
So I'm going to be working with Northeast Revenue on this, who does the auctions as well. We're going to be advertising on our website, advertising in newspapers. We're going to personally reach out to real estate developers as well as other real estate companies to be people to do it. I'm going to send the assessors out to knock on the doors of the properties next to these owners to let them know that this property next door to them is going up for auction if they would like to do it. Our assessor's office has offered to take that on as well. This is probably, obviously, we have these properties. We have no need for them. We've identified them. Through a lot of hard work from the GIS department, has been able to identify them. I don't know if we'll sell all of them. I don't know if we'll sell any, but I think it's worth a shot to try to get us across the line to at least get some tax revenue on these parcels from here. But I would be going with Northeast Revenue to try to run an auction. They've offered to do it to little to no cost for the county, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, and has there been a discussion about a minimum?
That's up to council. We could set up to whatever number you would like to set it at. 10% of the assessed value. I would caution that because some of these assessed values are pretty high, and that would be a concern that I would have if we're trying to sell the properties. It would be the goal. So I'm open for minimum bids or whatever parameters council likes to see, like to have on the sale. Obviously, this is the first time through this. Hopefully, the last time, and we'll go from there.
Well, hopefully, it's not the last time because we have many other properties that are yet to be sold.
We're still working on those deeds.
Yes. So hopefully, this will be the first of many.
Correct.
So we can get revenue into the county,
sure,
which we're all very happy about. I don't know about a minimum bid. I asked about a minimum bid because, the overarching goal as far as I think I'm concerned, and I think our real estate committee would agree, is to get the property sold and property owners paying taxes on these properties because we're not getting revenue for them right now.
We're getting nothing from these properties, and we haven't got 50 years for some of these properties we haven't done anything on.
Mm-hmm. My only concern on the question here, we're talking 60 properties. I think you have to take them individually for a minimum bid. You can't just have a minimum bid across the board for all of these. White assessors out there, give us a ballpark figure. I mean, how many people are in the assessor's office?
There's enough. We can give you a ballpark.
I mean, they could give us a ballpark on each one of these and give it start it off with a minimum bid from there.
I mean, if council would like to vote on this, or could table this up to you, or I could have the assessor's office provide a minimum bid that is reasonable for each parcel, as opposed to a blanket $500, something along those lines.
Right.
Obviously, we did pull the properties that we had previously discussed. We discussed those 2 properties in Harveys Lake. We're asking for appraisals on, as well as the property in Hazel Township.
And the property up close to Fox.
Oh, and also the property in Exeter, close to Fox Hill Golf.
So it's actually, what, 56 properties instead of 60?
Was it 56, Ronaldo?
56.
Yeah.
What's the time frame we're looking at, Mr. Manager? What do you think?
I would say within the next 2 to 3 months.
2 to 3 months.
I think I would like to give our assessor's offices enough time to give proper notification to the neighbors of a potential auction. I would love for the neighbors to pick up a piece of land next to them or something along those lines. Some of these, as you can see, are in the middle of wooded areas.
I think the knock and talk is the best approach.
And see if that works from there.
I want to show the public this. I mean, you've got these enclaves in the middle of the woods, somewhere in Dallas Township. I have no idea where that is.
So what they told me about those enclaves in Dallas Township were, what I've been told was that the county used to have a fair in the 40s and 50s, and they used to raffle those off.
How crazy is that? Raffle off the land.
I don't know. And then apparently those didn't work.
Wow.
But we're making up as we, I mean, listen.
But I would say too, and again, not my wheelhouse, but I love how you're talking about website news and newspapers, go through developers, and then obviously having the assessor's office go and knock on doors. Could you put maybe a couple dollars in signage and say, interest in this property? Call the county or come out to the auction on whatever date it is.
A posting,
any way we could get it out there, because I'm sure it'll spread, but it might take a couple months to spread around and get the most, the biggest spread. But
we want the biggest crowd possible for this.
Yeah.
We saw this as one opportunity to continue to do one mass movement of pieces of property and get them back onto the tax rolls. And get to move from there. We could move forward with a realtor or something along those lines, or I do think that would be a slower process, and I would have to take each piece of property through county council, through the real estate committee, then through a work session, through a voting session, in order to move forward with this. We could do it that way, but this could be a way that we can potentially move 30, 40 pieces of property for a decent amount of money and get it back onto the tax rolls. Best use of the land is use of the land. The county has no use for this land, and I don't foresee a use for these pieces of property.
I think we can try this for the first time at the very least, the auction I'm talking about, and see what it brings out, see who it brings out, see how much money it brings in. But I am liking the idea of the assessor's office able to provide a minimum bid.
Sure.
That would be, I'd feel more comfortable with it, with the auction.
I'll be happy to do that. So the assessor's office will review each property and provide a minimum bid on it with regard to their background, in order to identify, getting the piece of property to sell, as well as hopefully get the most bang for a buck back from the county, and hopefully we have a bidding war.
If the property doesn't meet the minimum bid, do we have a right to reject the auction's bidder?
Correct. That would be the terms of the auction going in.
Okay. So we would have the right to reject that if it didn't meet the
Correct. And also, I would also put parameters on the auction, the same parameters that Northeast Revenue puts on their auction by statute, which is if an entity bids on this piece of property and they owe back taxes on other pieces of property that they owe, they will not be eligible to bid, and they have to sign in ahead of time in order to do those things. I'm not looking to get these pieces of property and have these pieces of property become problem pieces of property. I want to use these. I want to get these onto someone else to utilize them.
Good.
Can I make an amendment then, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Is that all right? So after the now therefore be it resolved, council authorizes the county manager to sell the parcel identified and listed on the attached spreadsheet for a minimum bid of $500.
So you want to place an actual value of $500?
Said that.
All right, no.
There's different values on each parcel of land.
Well, absolutely.
So I could have the assessor's office. I could have the assessor's office review. Say one could be a $5,000 minimum bid. as opposed to a blanket one. And then I could have the assessor's office review all that and advertise that prior to the auction.
Okay, I still think a minimum bid of $500 regardless of the price. I mean, minimum, you have a lot of properties on here in the middle of nowhere too. It's a sizable acre. I don't know, that's just my motion, that's all.
That's your motion for
Somebody can second it if they'd
minimum
like to.
bid of $500, right?
Yep.
Do we have a second to that?
Okay. Thank you.
I would like to make a motion to postpone this until the minimum bids are placed on this. And then vote on it at that time so we could see exactly what the minimum bids would be. You think that could be done relatively quickly?
I could ask the assessor's office. Sure.
Well, my motion is to postpone it until we have minimum bids, maybe to the next meeting.
Zach makes a motion to postpone it. Do we have a second?
I second, yeah.
Ms. Saban? On that question? Roll call, please.
Ms. Edmond?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Waketh?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes. So it's postponed. Hopefully you'll have that
Sure.
before the weather turns bad.
Oh, I'll sit down with our assessor's office, come up with a minimum bid, and I'll also sit down with the solicitor's office in Northeast Revenue and come up with the parameters of the auction, so council can feel comfortable going forward. And hopefully, listen, we are still working on the other pieces of property, the pieces of property that we own but don't have deeds for, and the other pieces of property that we own but have deeds for, but they're in other people's names.
Okay.
It's a real estate legal issue that solicitor's office is enjoying
Very much.
untying.
Of the old books. I'm sending a question to my real estate professor in law school. It's a great exam question.
So we're getting there. Thank you.
All right, moving down to number 5, motion to adopt a resolution regarding monthly budget reports.
So moved.
Second.
Huck? Now, a second, Mr. Bowe. On the question?
I would just like to say, I think we discussed this at the work session. I did have a discussion with Shannon today about putting it into the administrative code, which I think we could do, but through the code review committee, but we haven't even started the administrative code reviews yet. So I would like to keep this resolution alive now, and then with the idea that when we do get through the administrative code, we may be adding this into it.
Anybody else on the question? I personally believe that this belongs in administrative code. I don't think it belongs as a resolution. I don't think at this point we should vote on it. We should wait for that to happen, and then it'll become part of administrative code, which would be something we would follow. So we'll make a motion, we postpone this. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Snee? On the question regarding postponement of motion number 5.
Or was a report prepared as you requested?
Yes.
Since the last meeting.
Well, yes, Mr. Swets did send us a sample, and I said I thought it was fine.
And you're just saying you want to make sure that future councils or anybody
Right, like if Mr. Swets accepts a job somewhere else tomorrow and Mr. Pedri goes to Tahiti, you know, we'd want to make sure that the format that we want is still there.
Will the council approve that? But I would say this: whether you postpone this or not, we're going to continue to provide the form in that format.
And I appreciate that, but again, it should be irrelevant who the personnel is. That's the point of it.
Yes.
If we don't do the resolution and we wait for the administrative code, is Mr. Pedri saying that Mr. Swets will still provide us this on an elective basis? So we really don't have to use the resolution. We can wait for the administrative code.
Well, that's correct, except that we started working on the codes. I just would remind you, we started working on the codes in, well, I guess February, and we're just now looking at approving changes to the personnel code, which is the first one we did. I wouldn't expect the administrative code to be done in the next few months.
But we wouldn't be hurting ourselves if the budget, if Mr. Sweat still follows through and provides these to us.
That's right, but unless you make a statement as to what format you want, you're going to be receiving whatever someone else chooses to give you. If you want to say, this is how I want it done, then you need to say that. I'm not saying that they're not going to follow through. I'm just saying that I asked for it for months, and at the last meeting, that's why I said I was going to bring something forward, because I asked for it for months. I got the promise, but we never actually saw the report. Now I saw a sample report, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. But I spent probably 8 months asking to see the report in that format, and it didn't happen. So my thought was that if it takes a vote of council to make it happen, and maybe what it took was the threat of a vote of council to make it happen, but, you know, that's why this is here.
We could.
I mean, administrative code could be amended now with this one particular issue.
You have to have an ordinance to amend the resolution there if we're all going to vote on adding it into the administrative code at some point. That point is not certain. You don't have a certain date as to when that's going to happen. I would like to have a statement by council now.
But I do think the administrative code is stronger, and also I believe the ordinance is the way to go.
I agree with you that it could be placed in there. I agree that it could be placed there.
What is the proper way to do it? Anyone else?
Well, if I could, Mr. Chair, we could always add it to the administrative code thereafter as well. If
We can do it now. We
Right.
can start the process now if you wish.
Yeah. But I think we could support this, and then if need be, if that's the will of the majority, we could
Well, I
certainly
think
add
the
that.
best way to do it is through the administrative code.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Roll call vote, please.
This is on the postponement.
Postpone.
Postpone.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
No.
Ms. Howe?
No.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Myself.
I'm sorry, Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
6 to 3.
So it's postponed per the vote, and we'll move on to number 6.
Question, please, though?
Yes.
On that previous vote. Mr. Sweats, you will provide that as requested in the format that you sent to Ms. Hauk?
Yeah, I said I would send one format, whatever the format council wanted is. So when you get your reports 2 weeks from now from June, it'll be in the format that was requested.
Well, it was requested by one person on council. It was not requested by council. Let's just be clear about that. The way to request it by council would have been to vote to request it as a council. I'm the only one who requested it.
No, I actually requested a sample. Thank you.
Thanks.
Number 6, motion to introduce the ordinance amending the Luzerne County Personnel Code. Ms. Howe?
As discussed at the work session, we had some minor revisions to the personnel code through the Code Review Committee. We did discuss those, if you need a refresher on them. They're mostly found at the end of the personnel code, which would be around page 114 of 119 and following there. And what it simply removed was the language that talked about as soon as possible after the effective date of the personnel code.
You make that motion?
I do make that motion.
Second, Mr. Snee. On the question? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you. That's the first reading. We will have a public hearing prior to our next meeting, and then we'll have the second reading on the agenda at our next meeting. Moving down to number 7, council nominations and appointments to the CCAP voting delegates. I received an email that's part of your packet today indicating that we're allowed to have 5 voting delegates. Currently, Ms. Hauk, Mr. Keller, and Mr. Haas, Mr. Williams had served in that capacity, and myself were the designees for last year. So do we have nominations for one of the 5 voting delegates.
Mr. Haas.
We have a nomination by Mr. Kelleher. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Wickes? We have 4 more to go.
Nominate Ms. Hauk.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Snee?
I nominate Mr. Vogt.
Second.
Two more.
Nominate Mr. McGinley.
We have a second?
Second.
One more.
Nominate Mr. Kelleher.
We have a second?
Second.
Saban? Do we have any other nominations?
Motion to close, Mr. Chair.
Well, we really didn't open, but that's fine. We have no other nominations. We have a motion to appoint Mr. Haas, Ms. Hauk, Mr. Vo, Mr. McGinley, and Mr. Keller to the voting delegates for the CCAP.
So moved.
Ms. Segman, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Wickes, on the question? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? None heard. Motion carries. Number 8, authority boards and commissions, nominations and appointments. Mr. Keller?
Yes, I think Attorney Saban and Bob Schnee would agree that the interviews last evening were wonderful. People willing to serve, they're very qualified. I want you to know that I talked to 3 of the people today again to make sure. Mr. Marchetti is a licensed engineer. He's a PE. Ciro Cinti has served on children and youth, and I would say that man, much of his, if anybody knows him, much of his life is dedicated to helping youth. Eileen Song is an immigrant to this country from Korea.
South Korea.
And her father had to take a loan out and borrow money so she could travel to this country and become a citizen. And she's a person who's very thankful for all the wonderful gifts she's been given in this country, and she's worked to attain, and she would also like to serve on children and youth. And I don't think there's any conflict with Eileen Song, is that correct?
No, there's not.
No conflict. So I would mention those 3, first of all, for children and youth, and we do have, I hope I don't mind, I'm not breaking protocol, but I think we have a number of vacancies on the Children and Youth Board. Is that correct? Correct. So I would suggest we start with children and youth, and those three names right there are names that could be nominated that we know a lot about their feelings about, their strong feelings for children and youth.
Let's go back. Do we have a motion to open up nominations?
So moved.
Mr. Keller, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Snee?
On the question, Mr. Chair?
To open up the nominations?
Yeah.
Yes.
So said nominations, are they all 3-year terms?
Yes.
Okay. 'Cause I see we have one resolution here, so we just basically...
That's just a sample resolution.
Okay, do it 3 times then.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? All in favor of opening nominations indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any opposition? None heard. Motion carries. We'll begin with children and youth. Mr.
Cyril Cinti.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Snee for Mr. Cinti.
Second the motion.
Second, Mr. Haas. We have any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Eileen Song.
Song. Mr. Keller. Do we have a second from?
Second.
Ms. Wickes. Do we have any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Lawrence Marchetti.
All right, Mr. Marchetti, you said you spoke to him today, Mr. Keller?
I did. He said he would serve in any way that we felt would help the county.
Okay, because his application didn't have that checked, but.
Yep.
but
He
so-
mentioned specifically children and youth. He did. You
Okay.
talked about that in the interview session, too.
Okay. Mr. Vogt makes the nomination. Do we have a second? Ms. Sagan. Any other nominations?
I nominate Martin Darto.
Martin Darto.
Who is also an immigrant from Africa.
Ms. Sagan
And,
makes the nomination. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Vogt? Anyone else? Do we have a motion to close the nominations for the children and youth?
So move.
Second? Do we have a second?
Yes.
Segment, all in favor? Indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition? Any abstentions? None heard. Motion carries. Okay. Do we have 4 openings? Yes. Okay.
Can I just speak to on the
Yes.
nominations, Mr. Chair? I'm looking at the 44 Airport, which I'm assuming, Mr. Keller, we're going to vote on these 2 potential seats as well. I see Mr. Marchetti is there for 44, being an engineer. Might that be, he'd be better suited for that? Did he express an interest, or?
He said anyway, and I know that right now we've been operating without hardly anybody on that advisory board over there at the airport. But my order of priorities, this is me, I'm not speaking for anybody else, is children and youth. And I think that man would be good either place.
Okay. All right.
You vote your conscience. but
That's
I-
helpful. You were there. I didn't attend the meeting, so thanks for taking the time.
If he's not listed on the sheet, though, is that proper for me to nominate him?
Both also.
Well, he's not listed on the eligibility sheet, but you checked with him today, you said.
I did. I talked to him personally because I want to make sure in each case the person was committed to serving somewhere, and he said children and youth would be fine, and I would serve wherever the council felt I would be a help. So if that's a problem with it, because he's not listed on here.
Really, Mr. Crowe, thanks for doing the follow-through. It's a lot of work on that committee, so thank you for doing that.
At this juncture, I don't believe it's a problem.
Okay. Checking with solicitor, she does not believe it would be a problem.
Thank you.
And since Mr. Haas brought it up, Mr. Darto also indicated an interest in the 44th Airport.
Oh, Mr. Gartrell?
Darto. I think that's the way.
Oh, Darto, yeah, absolutely. Darto as well. I was just thinking of the gentleman's engineering background on the 44th. That was my logic, but said I wasn't at the committee.
Okay. Do we have a motion in for Mr. Senti?
So moved.
Ms. Segman, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Snee? Roll call, please.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Do we have a motion for Ms. Song?
So move.
Mr. Keller? Do we have a second?
Yes.
Segman? Roll call, please.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Mr. Marchetti?
So
Motion.
moved.
Mr. Snee? Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Kelleher? Roll call, please.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
No.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes. We have a motion for Mr. Darto.
So moved.
Ms. Wakes? We have a second?
Second.
Mr. Snee? Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Edmond?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakus?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
No. Motion carries.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, the 4 people are appointed to the Children and Youth Advisory Board. Moving down to B, Convention Center Authority.
One more thing, Mr. Chair. Can I ask, Ms. Keller, how many more openings are on the Children and Youth Advisory Board? Do we have any?
Still more openings, yes.
Do you know how many offhand?
I thought there was 9, but it looks like 8 here.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
we have another amount equal to what we have.
Actually, the one set of bylaws, I think, is up to 24 potential openings.
Oh, my goodness.
Membership. But that's shared between Luzerne and Wyoming County. But I think the proposed bylaw update would reduce that down to 15 as a membership.
Okay.
So depending on when that would happen.
Mm-hmm. And let's look in the next couple of weeks or months.
Yes.
We're changing that. Okay. I mean, because I look at the 44 Airport. I mean, that's been vacant for a long time. We've had a hard time there. They just had Airport Days a couple of weeks ago. It was a nice event, and I don't know if we could beat the bushes to get some folks to and serving that. I know you're doing yeoman's work there, Mr. Keller, and your committee, but that's a gem over there, the 44 Airport, and I think it would really behoove us to help people serve in that area. But I know we can't even fill the Children and Youth Board up to its maximum either, so I get the situation. So
Difficult decision there, which way you should support someone.
Yep. All right, thank you.
Convention Center Authority, open nominations.
Neil D'Angelo.
I nominate Jim Reno.
Wait a minute. Oh, we have to open nominations first, please.
So moved.
Sorry, we'll vote to open nominations.
Second.
Reno, open the nominations.
All in favor of the nominations being open indicate by saying aye.
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 Any in opposition? Any abstentions? None heard. Now we'll accept nominations.
Neil D'Angelo.
Mr. D'Angelo from Mr. Schnee. Do we have a second from Mr. D'Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Segman?
I nominate Jim Reno.
Mr. Reno? Mr. Berminski? Do we have
Second
a
that,
second?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Haas, second. Thank you. Any other nominations?
I nominate Rodney Kaiser.
Kaiser? Mr. Kaiser? Ms. Segman? Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Wakus? Any other nominations? We have a motion to close nominations?
So move.
So moved. Mr. Kelleher, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Schnee, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any in opposition? Any abstentions? None heard? Nominations are closed. So we have 3 gentlemen, Mr. D'Angelo, Mr. Reno, Mr. Kaiser. We'll go around, follow the roll call and indicate we have 1 position, which is due to the vacancy of Mr. Cotter that we had last meeting that we had. So we have 1 vacancy, and that would fulfill that vacancy for that period of time. So indicate by name the person you support, Mr. D'Angelo, Mr. Reno, Mr. Kaiser.
Ms. Edmond?
Mr. Kaiser.
Mr. Schnee?
Mr. D'Angelo.
Mr. Vogt?
Mr. D'Angelo?
Ms. Wakus?
Mr. D'Angelo?
Mr. McGinley?
Mr. Reno.
5 for Reno, 3 for D'Angelo, and 1 for Kaiser.
Correct. Correct?
Only 9. Correct.
Do they have to have a minimum?
That's only 9.
We only have 9 members voting, right? Mr. Perry's not here, and Mr. Urban's not here.
I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, now we need a motion for resolution.
Is there a minimum? There has to be.
Yeah, we need 6, right?
Correct.
We need 6.
We have to go.
So we have Mr. Reno at 5, Mr. D'Angelo at 3, and Mr. Kaiser had 1. So we have to revote with the top 2 people. That would be Mr. Reno and Mr. D'Angelo. Roll call again.
Mr. Schnee?
D'Angelo.
Mr. Vogt?
Mr. D'Angelo.
Ms. Wakes?
Mr. D'Angelo.
Mr. Brzezinski?
Reno.
Mr. Haas?
Mr. Reno.
Ms. Hauk?
Mr. Reno.
Mr. Kelleher?
Mr. Reno.
Ms. Sedman?
Mr. D'Angelo.
Mr. McGinley?
Doesn't make any difference. Mr. Reno.
Still 4.
Who are we missing?
There's 2 members.
4 or 5, we only have 9 people.
We only have 9
You need
people.
6.
Yep. So we can't make an appointment. We don't have enough. We have to have 6 votes for someone.
It's a pretty critical vote. Can I
Very
request
critical vote. We
can I
have 2
request a
members who are
revote,
not here.
Mr. Chair? Can I request a
Excuse
revote? One more time?
One more
I
time.
don't know if that's bylaws. Maybe things will change. I don't know.
No, one more time? Okay.
Yeah, it has to be 6.
Mr. Vogt?
Mr. D'Angelo.
Ms. Wakes?
Mr. D'Angelo.
Mr. Brzezinski?
Reno.
Mr. Haas?
Mr. Reno.
Ms. Hauk?
Mr. Reno.
Mr. Kelleher?
Mr. Reno.
Ms. Sedman?
Mr. D'Angelo.
Mr. Schnee?
D'Angelo.
And Mr. McGinley?
Mr. Reno, it's the same 5.
Thanks for indulging me, Mr. Chair.
No appointment at this point in time.
I move to postpone the
Second.
appointment.
Second.
We have a move to postpone the appointment. Ms. Hauk, do we have a second to that? Is that Mr. Hauk?
Second.
Mr. Haas? Mr. Vogt? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? None heard. Okay, that'll be back on the agenda. For your Ford Airport Advisor, we don't have anybody now, correct?
We don't.
So that will not be. Voted on this evening. Public comment? Let's see here. Ms. McKay?
Bring up anything now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I brought up the reassessment of property that was done 30 days ago, and it was listed at $11.45 million. It went down to 5-point-some million. You know, this county's hurting, you know, people's losing their houses every day. Why should a company from out of the state get, you know, a couple years ago they took over the corporation and they fired 300 people that worked there for 20, 30 years that cleaned house. It's a non-union place, and I don't feel as though a place like this should be granted almost a $5 or $6 million gift, you know. And I don't know how many other major companies. I didn't see it. A guy told me in church Sunday about it, and you know, I looked into it and I called the library. I got the figures, you know, and they told me yeah. And how many people's on the reassessment board that makes a decision like this?
On the appeals board, the
Yeah.
assessment appeals board, there are 3.
Great. And they do something like this every day, and it's a non-union shop. It's
Well, they meet on a regular basis to review the appeals.
I think the one you're referring to, Mr. McKay, was actually a court order.
a court order.
I believe so. If it's the one I'm thinking of.
They're from Tennessee.
I'll look
It's a
into
corporation.
I'll check to make sure, but I believe that one was actually went through the assessment appeals and then they
About a
appealed
month
it.
ago, it was in the Times Leader, you know.
I believe this one that one was a court order.
And does the court intercede a lot like this, or?
Well, what happens is somebody appeals their taxes. It goes to the assessment board. After the assessment board makes a decision, they have 30 days to appeal it to the Court of Common Pleas.
Right.
And then that's an absolute right to an appeal if they would like to appeal to the Court of Common Pleas, which many people do.
Right. You know what scares me too is Duryea. Is that part of Luzerne County?
Yep.
Yes.
It is, because my daughter lives in Duryea and she pays her sewer bill to the Lackawanna Sewer Authority. That's why I was wondering.
But Duryea is part of Luzerne County.
Because another Luzerne in a year or so is moving 300-400 people up to Duryea, you know, from Exeter. And Exeter is going to be hurt, you know. It's a shame, you know. If I can name all the companies through the last 20-25 years that moved out of the area, major corporations, like for one, I worked for RCA Thompson Consumer Electronics for 30 years, and they promised that we're the show place of the world. Well, guess what? One day we come into work and they're moving to Mexico. They weren't happy with Mexico. They went to China. Greed, you know, and it's a shame, you know. But Technoglass, the same thing. Atlas Chain and Cable, American Chain and Cable. All these companies went by the wayside. And like I said, for the assessor's office, well, he said it might be a court order, you know, but another thing is, our county engineer is here today. I brought up about the lights for the bridge on the Water Street Bridge, and I went back. After you had it shut down for 3 days, they did a good job on doing the concrete work the way it was supposed to be done to begin with, without throwing a shovel of blacktop in. And so you did a good job on that, but anything on the lights?
Contracts were sent over to Pennsylvania to BB&L last Friday.
Because you know why? It wasn't this past Friday. The Friday before I went over there, I was there at 9:30 at night. The main street was lit up. The Fort Jenkins Bridge was lit up. And the Water Street Bridge wasn't lit up. But then when I went over at 4:30 in the morning, because I usually check on stuff, and I went over, and the lights that's been out for, there's 3 of them still out on the bridge, you know. That's why I'd appreciate before an accident or something happens that you follow through with it, you know, because I notified you back in November, and here it is like 8, 9 months later that the situation isn't taken care of yet, you know.
Mr. McCabe.
And I appreciate council for looking into it, and the council chairman went up and you did the bridge, the foundation, or the bridge, the floor, the right way, you know, and it looks real good, you know.
Mr. McCabe,
and,
you're over your time, but thank you.
Okay, one more. I like to commend somebody. I like to commend the warden. He made a fine decision on hiring somebody that wasn't supposed to be hired because he was fired from another job, and I appreciate the decision made on that. And I won't bring it up who it was, you know, but thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Griffith?
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you for putting at least a dollar amount in that resolution. It's helpful. At least it's some kind of teeth into a resolution. The other concern that I have is the resolution that was obviously postponed from the Real Estate Committee. The Real Estate Committee did a fine job of making sure that all that stuff was documented and everything was taken care of with the GIS department. I think the Real Estate Committee should also be in the loop with the administration to set the ordinance or the resolution in place to make sure if there's a minimum bid, whether it's a percentage or whatever that number should be, and then bring the final product to this council to be voted on, rather than do it helter-skelter when the resolution get here and make amendments and all that. The Real Estate Committee could probably get that all done handedly with the administration and then have a comprehensive resolution, rather than have the Office of Law, who works for the manager, just drop a resolution on the table, hoping to God that you guys just blindly pass it. And that's exactly what would have happened. You guys would have blindly passed that resolution had I not brought it up, I'm sure. So I appreciate you tabling it at least to get something that protects the taxpayers of this county. The other question that I have is when the committee review commission, Ms. Houck's committee gets together to look at the ethics code, I wish they would look at the ethics code. My complaint after a year was dismissed from the Ethics Commission by the attorney, the ACE attorney. There was no explanation given as to why it was dismissed. There was no, I have substantial evidence to prove that this should never have been dismissed. However, I have no appeal process. I have no recourse as a complainant. I have no explanation from the attorney. It took them a total of 2 days to dismiss a complaint that took a year to get on the table to this ACE Commission. And it gives the complainant absolutely no recourse. If the ACE attorney says this is dismissed, you're done. Even though I have substantial evidence to prove otherwise, there's nothing I can do with that evidence. Nothing. That is just wrong. We were sold on this home rule government that if you have an ethics complaint, the place to go would be to the Ethics Commission. When you go to the Ethics Commission, if they're connected or not connected, or they have some in, all the ACE attorney has to say is, sorry, dismissed, and you're done. That is just wrong. Just wrong. I was never consulted. Nobody ever sent me any letter to say why it was dismissed. The ACE code was violated by the attorney because he didn't read it properly. But I have no recourse. So we need to look at that, because that is the keystone of this whole home rule charter that needs to be addressed. My only recourse is to litigate it through the newspaper. Don't want to do that because it's supposed to be confidential, but they don't give us any, they don't give a complaint any recourse. So if the commission would look at that and see if there's ways we could fix that as well, that would be very helpful. And the last, there was something else that I had here, and let me look at my notes real quick. The Act 13 meeting, I wish that the Office of Law would instruct committees that they have to keep minutes and they have to record their minutes. They don't do that still. I brought that up at least 3 times, maybe this is 4th time, to the chair as well as his council. Those meetings should be recorded, they should be documented, and the meetings should be approved. The minutes of those meetings should be approved. They used to be, years ago. They're not anymore. I wish we would fix this and make sure that the Sunshine Law is not being violated at every committee meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Ola?
Mr. Chair, we did record our Act 13 committee meeting.
I think all the meetings were recorded.
Yeah.
They were recorded?
Via.
Okay, so they're going to put the minutes up for approval then next time, right?
They're approved by consent.
Okay, thank you very much. I know they don't.
Let's see here. Back again with the same old topic. We seem to be beating around the bush on New World. Years ago, when a few of us have some gray memories, you folks were promised that you were going to get trained on Epic, or not Epic, another disastrous ERP system.
Mr. Olive, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Hello. Years ago, we bought an ERP system. And part of the package deal was that you folks were going to get trained on the use of it, what it can do, what it couldn't, and avail you folks remotely with the access, including VRW, so that you could run reports any way you want, inside out, sideways, and upside down. Now, 5 or 6 years later, we're relegated to picking one report that you folks have to agree to, its format. I think you ought to go back to what was originally agreed to so that you can have what you need to do your jobs. Ms. Hout may have one idea to look at. Ms. Sabin may have another. Mr. McGinley may have still another. You got to be able to access this thing to manage the county. No ifs, ands, or buts. Everybody else has been doing this way for 25, 30 years. Maybe in the next 5 years you'll get it. Back to old business. 2 items that were brought up in the past. One was, who's the contractor who did the county-owned roadway into Hanover Industrial Park? And I think a side comment on that was, are we going to sue them for malpractice or misdelivery, whatever the hell you want to call it? And the other one was, that I recall, was what's the salvage value of the 3 replaced trucks, and where were the salvage value, where was that booked? Or maybe there isn't any salvage value and we still have the trucks. I thought the agreement was that we were going to get rid of them with some undefined salvage value. So maybe 3 months from now we'll get those answers too. Thank you.
Mr. Shiner?
On the sale of the county-owned properties, It's good to have a minimum. Probably should be based on a percentage of what the assessed value is. But again, we've owned these properties for decades, some of them over 100 years. What's your hurry? You need to get the most money you can for the people of this county. And remember, in your haste to unload these any way you can, according to state law, if you sell a $60,000 property for $1,000, that is the new assessed value, and that's all we're going to get in taxes. So consider that too, in your haste to dump these properties any way you can. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience? Commentary? Okay. We have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Mr. Keller, Mr. Haas, all in favor?
Aye.
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 We'll reconvene at 7:25 with the work session.